Consider the experience of opening a bag of chips, intending to eat just a handful, only to find the entire package empty minutes later. Society often labels this as a failure of willpower or a severe lack of self-discipline, but science reveals a vastly different and far more complex reality. The overwhelming urge to keep eating certain foods is not a moral failing, but a highly orchestrated biological response. We are dealing with products specifically engineered to bypass our natural satiety signals. Today, we explore the science behind this phenomenon, peeling back the layers of marketing to understand what is truly happening inside our bodies. Let us understand the precise biological and psychological mechanisms that make certain food combinations nearly impossible to resist. By examining the evidence, we can equip ourselves with the scientific understanding necessary to navigate a food environment designed to keep us eating. This knowledge empowers us to reclaim control over our health and make truly informed dietary choices. To begin, we must define what we mean by hyper-palatable foods. These are not simply items that taste good, like a perfectly ripe strawberry or a well-seasoned piece of fish. Hyper-palatable foods are typically ultra-processed foods characterized by highly specific, unnatural combinations of fat, sugar, sodium, and refined carbohydrates. In nature, foods are generally high in either fat, like nuts and avocados, or high in carbohydrates, like fruit, but rarely both. The modern food environment has merged these macronutrients into single, highly engineered packages. To understand why these combinations are so captivating, we must look at human evolutionary biology and our brain reward pathways. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors lived in environments where calories were scarce and unpredictable. Finding a source of dense energy, like a honeycomb or a fatty animal, was a rare and critical survival event. Our brains evolved to heavily reward the consumption of these calorie-dense foods, ensuring we would seek them out again and store enough energy to survive potential famines. The primary currency of this biological reward system is a neurotransmitter called dopamine. When we consume something vital for survival, we experience a significant dopamine release. While often simplified in popular culture as merely the pleasure chemical, dopamine is more accurately described by neuroscientists as a learning and motivation molecule. It signals to the brain that a behavior is worth remembering and repeating. The greater the calorie density of the food, the stronger the dopamine response, cementing the deep desire to find and consume that food again. The problem arises because our ancient biology is now operating in a modern environment of absolute abundance. The ultra-processed foods lining supermarket shelves deliver a concentrated dose of rapidly absorbing calories that our evolutionary programming never anticipated. When we eat a commercially produced pastry or a heavily seasoned snack, the resulting dopamine spike far exceeds what we would experience from eating whole, natural foods. This exaggerated response essentially hijacks our neural circuitry. This hijacking is not an accident, but the result of meticulous scientific calculation. Food scientists utilize a concept known as the bliss point. The bliss point is the precise mathematical optimization of sugar, salt, and fat that maximizes sensory pleasure while minimizing the brain's signal that we have eaten enough. It is the exact threshold where a food product becomes incredibly desirable, just before it becomes overwhelmingly sweet or salty. Hitting this specific point guarantees maximum consumer craving and repeated purchases. The food industry invests billions of dollars into sensory engineering to consistently hit these bliss points across thousands of products. They study crunch mechanics, mouthfeel, flavor release profiles, and visual appeal to create a multi-sensory experience that fundamentally alters our eating behavior. By perfectly balancing these elements, food companies create items that dissolve rapidly in the mouth, tricking the brain into thinking fewer calories are being consumed than actually are. This phenomenon, known as vanishing caloric density, encourages continuous mindless eating. Another biological mechanism exploited by these engineered foods is sensory-specific satiety. This is the phenomenon where our appetite for a specific flavor decreases the more we eat it, which naturally encourages us to seek out a variety of nutrients in the wild. You might feel completely full after a large savory meal, yet suddenly find room when a sweet dessert is presented. Hyper-palatable foods often combine multiple complex flavor profiles into a single bite, effectively overriding sensory-specific satiety and delaying the feeling of fullness. As we repeatedly consume these highly rewarding foods, our brains attempt to adapt to the constant surges of dopamine. To protect itself from overstimulation, the brain engages in a process called receptor downregulation. It essentially reduces the number of active dopamine receptors available. Consequently, normal, healthy foods begin to taste bland and unappealing, and we require increasingly larger quantities of hyper-palatable foods to achieve the same level of satisfaction. This cycle closely mirrors the neurological patterns observed in behavioral addictions. The impact of these foods extends far beyond the brain, profoundly affecting the gut microbiome. We must define the gut microbiome as the complex ecosystem of trillions of microorganisms, primarily bacteria, living in our digestive tract, which play a crucial role in our overall health. Diets heavy and ultra-processed, hyper-palatable foods lack the dietary fiber necessary to feed beneficial gut bacteria. Instead, they often contain emulsifiers, artificial sweeteners, and preservatives that can alter the composition of this delicate ecosystem. Emerging research indicates a powerful connection known as the gut-brain axis, where these microbes communicate directly with our central nervous system via the vagus nerve. When the microbiome is unbalanced by a poor diet, certain opportunistic bacteria that thrive on sugar and refined fats can actually send signals to the brain, potentially driving cravings for the very foods that sustain them. We are just beginning to fully map how our dietary choices shape this internal ecosystem and how that ecosystem in turn influences our daily behavior. Furthermore, the consumption of these engineered products severely disrupts our metabolism. Metabolism encompasses the complex chemical processes that occur within a living organism to maintain life, including how we convert food into energy. Ultra-processed foods are typically pre-digested through industrial refining, meaning the body expends very little energy breaking them down. This alters their bioavailability, which is the proportion of a nutrient that enters circulation and is able to have an active effect. The high bioavailability of refined sugars means they flood the bloodstream almost instantly. This rapid influx of glucose creates a sharp spike in blood sugar, prompting the pancreas to release a large surge of insulin to clear the glucose from the blood. This exaggerated insulin response often pulls too much sugar out of circulation too quickly, leading to a subsequent crash. When blood sugar plummets, the brain perceives a state of starvation, triggering intense, urgent cravings for more quick-acting energy. This creates a physiological roller coaster that keeps us reaching for more hyper-palatable foods throughout the day. Understanding these profound biological and chemical mechanisms is the first step in breaking the cycle. When we recognize that the urge to consume a sleeve of cookies is driven by engineered bliss points, dopamine surges, and disrupted metabolic pathways, we can remove the heavy stigma of personal failure. This scientific perspective shifts our focus from restrictive dieting and guilt toward a strategy of biological rehabilitation. We can begin to make choices that support our physiology rather than constantly fighting against it. Healing these pathways involves transitioning toward a dietary pattern rich in whole unprocessed foods by focusing on intact proteins, healthy fats, and complex carbohydrates. We provide our bodies with essential micronutrients. We define micronutrients as the vital vitamins and minerals required in small amounts for proper physiological function, which are largely stripped from ultra-processed goods over time. A diet focused on whole foods allows dopamine receptors to upregulate, restores the balance of the gut microbiome, and stabilizes blood sugar levels. As our biology heals, the intense grip of hyper-palatable foods begins to loosen, and our taste buds regain their sensitivity to the subtle, natural flavors of real food. The scientific evidence is clear that our modern food environment is uniquely challenging, but our bodies are incredibly resilient. By illuminating the science behind what we eat, we equip ourselves with the most powerful tool available. True health empowerment comes not from following the latest fad, but from a profound understanding of our own biology and the origins of our nutrition.